So for tonight, I'm going to start in chapter 7 and introduce you a little bit to Peter. So Peter was the love of Mary's life, and he left her to go make something of himself with the promise of coming back to marry her. But he came back, and when he came back, he had somebody else with him, and he married her. And so this is the first time Mary is going to see him in about 10 years. Peter's heart pounded as he neared Mary's house. What was he going to say to her? What would she look like now? Would she be his same sweet Mary? Had she changed, as Mrs. Ange had intimated? He hesitated at the door, then rapped a few times. While he waited, he noticed the fading white clapboards. The storm windows seemed to have been recently removed by the look of the open nail holes on the sash. Poor Mary, she would have to do all this work by herself. Suddenly she was standing in front of him. His heart skipped a beat, and he was speechless. "Hello, Peter," he heard her say. Time stood still. He stood dumbfounded, unable to utter a word. She looked beautiful. "Can I help you with something?" "Peter, are you all right?" "No," he heard himself say. "I mean, yes." He finally managed. "Mary, how are you?" "Good." She paused expectantly and then softly asked, "Peter, why are you here?" "I'm truly sorry to hear about your mom and dad. They were great people," he said. "Your parents were good to me and Ed." "Thank you." Mary didn't want to talk about her parents. She couldn't expose two raw wounds at the same time. "You still haven't answered me. Why are you here?" "I can't answer that. I don't know how," he murmured. God, she was here with him, right before his eyes, and he couldn't say what he wanted to say. "I think you need to leave, Peter. I don't want you here," Mary said, her voice turning hard and cold. Then a brown-haired girl came out behind her. "Mary, is everything all right out here?" "Yes, Meg. Peter was just leaving." Peter didn't know what to do. He didn't want to impose, but he didn't want to go. Finally, after thinking about it, and with two girls barring his entrance, he decided to do the latter. Take a sip. "Good evening to you both," Peter said, as he turned on the doorstep to leave. He looked back for a moment and said matter-of-factly, "I'll come back tomorrow, Mary." It was a promise he meant to keep. He was still in awe that he had seen her face for the first time since the day he broke her heart. She hadn't changed. Next time he would be more prepared and know what to say to her. For now he was content having seen her face. She hadn't been furious with him. At least that hurt had calmed, or so he hoped. But how could she ever forgive him when he still struggled with what he had done to her? He owed his brother, but he owed her as well. What justification did he have to make that choice? He hoped she'd understand what he had done and why he did it. It had been the honorable thing to do, his duty, whether it was the right thing or not. He slowly made his way back to Mrs. Ange's, where he hoped to get some rest. So now I'm going to move over to chapter 8. So I apologize, I have a little bit of a scratchy throat tonight. Nothing serious, just every now and again I have a little bit of a dry throat. And so if I'm reaching for water more often, it's the reason. So in chapter 8, lost in thought and preoccupied, Mary suddenly realized the sun was high in the sky and she had been gone longer than planned. And she still didn't know what to say to Peter. She knew nothing about him anymore, nor why he was here in John's Pond. Though she knew it was wrong, her heart renewed the ache for him as if she were still 17. Where was his wife? Where were his children? Why weren't they with him? How long was he staying? So many questions, and the only way to get the answers was to talk to Peter. That's what she would do. She smiled tentatively, happy she had made up her mind again. If she didn't change it another time, she'd be fine. Approaching Alice's garden, she sensed, rather than saw, something was different. She hesitantly climbed the fence and surveyed the area from the top rung. Nothing seemed out of place, but she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling, and the hair rose on the back of her neck for the second time in as many days. Maybe Meg is getting to me, making me jittery, she thought. Picking up the pace once again, and with her nerves on high alert, she shook off her anxiety. She was spooked by the events of the last few days. As she routed around the shabby abandoned stable, she listened for the owl to announce his displeasure at her presence. There was no sound from the old critter. Maybe he had fled, aware something was wrong. She heard the door creak behind her and abruptly stopped in her tracks. This was new. The door hadn't made a sound for as long as Mary had passed it. The stable was falling asunder, not fit for man nor beast. One hatch on the stable loft allowed free access to the birds, but the double barn doors had always been barred. Then it dawned on her. The board across the two doors was not sitting in the latches. It was out of place. Someone was either in there right now or had been there and left. She knew she should run the other way, but instead, Mary began to creep toward the barn. Her nerves were on edge, though she didn't know why. She thought it important not to be heard. As she neared the door, she noticed the grass was disturbed. She pressed her back to the rough boards, slowly moving toward the opening. With her hands on the rotting wood of what had one time been a fine handle, Mary slowly pulled back the door an inch or so and peeked in. With the early afternoon sun streaming through the hatch above and on through the seams in the loft, it was hard to see beyond the distorted black and white in the old building. She waited several seconds for her heart to beat somewhat close to normal, counted to 3, took a deep breath, pulled back the door, and stepped in. The church bells were ringing the alarm for the second time in 3 days. Meg eyed Daniel as he stirred on the daybed. She leaned over him, being careful not to disturb him, and peered through the curtains toward the commotion down the lane. Although the constables weren't expected until late evening, Meg hoped it was a signal they had arrived early. She watched the activity as the crowd gathered in the church. Where was Mary? She should have been back by now. Meg was worried, but felt she couldn't leave Daniel to go find out what was going on. She tried to calm herself, but her imagination had a way of getting the better of her common sense. After all, they were in John's Pond, and nothing exciting beyond the scattered wedding happened in John's Pond. Then she glanced down at Daniel, and her heart began to race. Oh, yes, it did, she thought. Yes, it did. She quickly realized that pacing and cleaning to keep her mind occupied wouldn't help. Something was wrong with Mary. She just knew it. She couldn't stand the not knowing anymore. The racket she made by pushing the chair about and sweeping the floor didn't drown out the sounds of the bell, nor did it help settle her nerves. Instead, it woke Daniel. What the hell is going on? He asked, still half dazed and nauseated. I don't know, Meg answered. The bells in the church are ringing. Well, is Mary gone to see what's happening? No. No. Meg, where is Mary? I don't know. Meg lost control and began to cry. Daniel tried to get up too quickly and fell back with a note that Meg could neither understand nor repeat. She stepped forward and tried to steady him so he wouldn't end up on the floor. Meg, what do you mean you don't know? Where did Mary go? Daniel grimaced through the pain. Meg continued to sob. She left to go for a walk this morning, but hasn't come back. I thought she would be here by now. Meg, stop crying. It's important. Where did Mary go? I didn't look, so I don't know. I do know she likes to keep to the woods and not on the trail. She could be anywhere. They heard hurried footsteps on the loose gravel in the lane. Meg ran out through the porch and swung open the door. Mary, where have you been? To her disappointment, it was Richard, and he was winded. He stopped abruptly in front of her. Meg, are you and Mary all right? 2 of the Davis girls are gone, and Brian sent me up here to check on you two. What do you mean they're gone? Did they go home? Richard took deep breaths and explained that Regina and Ethel Davis, the 2 nurses, left for home in Calnet that morning. With 2 doctors and all the volunteers, they had decided on a respite. Their father had walked out from Calnet to meet them and showed up at the store. He thought they were delayed, but Mrs. Ange related that they had left just after breakfast. A couple of volunteers were a short while behind Mr. Davis, and they saw no sign of the pair either. Mrs. Ange brought him over to the church with the doctors where they raised the alarm. Richard's face was worried, his freckles all the more pronounced with his red hair. Oh, Richard, Mary is gone too. What? Richard asked. What do you mean she's gone? Meg collapsed on the step and bawled. She's gone. She went for a walk and hasn't come back. I was getting worried about her when I heard the bell. Richard, what if something has happened to Mary Rowe too? Richard grabbed Meg's shoulders. Meg, you have to calm down and tell me exactly what you know. Peter showed up yesterday evening and spooked Mary. She wanted to go for a walk, a long walk, Meg said between sobs. Where did she go? Richard asked, still holding her shoulders. He shook her gently. Meg, where did she go? I don't know. Richard pulled her to her feet. That's okay, Meg. We'll find her. We'll find all 3 of them. Meg, we have to tell everyone that Mary Rowe is missing. Get your coat and hurry. Meg swiveled and rushed inside, with Richard close on her heels. As she crossed the kitchen to get her coat, she stopped. Richard was behind her and would see Daniel. She turned to explain, but saw Daniel wasn't on the David. She kept quiet and carried on up to the front porch to grab her jacket. She got a bit of a start when she saw Daniel leaning against the wall in the front room. He motioned for her to keep silent, and she nodded ever so slightly. She shoved her arms into her coat sleeves and hurriedly fixed the buttons. Rushing back through the kitchen, she grabbed Richard's hand for reassurance. He paused before closing his hand around hers and led her from the house. They rushed to the church. When they burst through the doors, Richard let her go. Meg was still crying for her missing friend. Richard shouted for everyone to be quiet. Mary Rowe is missing too. Everyone in the room turned in unison, several exclaiming their surprise. Peter was the first to make it to them, followed closely by Brian and Carla. Where is Mary? They asked. Meg, stop crying now and tell the folks what you know, Richard said. He wished he was still holding her hand so he could will her his strength. Meg explained between sobs that Mary had gone for a long walk and hadn't returned. It's your fault, she said, pointing at Peter. If you hadn't shown up yesterday, she wouldn't have gone in the woods. What do you mean, miss? Peter asked. Meg told them about Mary's meeting with Peter and her subsequent need to be alone. She should have been back by now. Peter, what's she talking about? Brian asked. I went to see her yesterday evening just to say hello. I was only on the step for a moment and then I left. This young girl was with her. If you upset her, Brian began, but Carla touched his arm. Let's everyone calm down, Carla said. We need to concentrate on finding your sister. Meg, do you know where she went? Brian asked. Meg started to cry again, shaking her head. All she knows is that Mary went into the woods for a walk, Richard said. She doesn't know which way. The room erupted with talk again. 3 girls were missing. Brian quickly took charge. He organized a group. He sent people out along the trails to Colonette and North Harbour to look for any signs of the trio. He assigned Mr. Vince Doran to fire off shots at intervals as a beacon in case they were lost. 3 rapidly fired rounds were a signal to return. Mrs. Ange went to the shop to get some cartridges, and so the search began.